Classic, iconic, rage-inducing, genre-defining, and above all else, fun. The classic TMNT games of old run the gamut when it comes to different gameplay types and styles, and having at least one of them in your collection was an absolute must back in the late 80s and early 90s. But for literal decades now, most of these amazing titles have been stuck on the classic consoles that they were released on, being available to only those who already had them, or to those foolish enough to venture into the ever-growing world of retro collecting. Of course though, there was always another way to play these games. A method that puts even the most elusive, the most expensive titles at your fingertips with a mere click. A method that includes online play, customizations, and even some upgrades. And all for free. Knowing this, does the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection bring enough to the table to warrant a purchase, when emulators still do a few things better? Now, I just want to put this out here right at the start. I'm not promoting emulation, especially now that all of these games are available for legit purchase. I'm just telling it like it is. And regardless of how you play them, each of these games in this collection is amazing. Don't give me that look. Or, at the very least, are interesting in their own right, and deserve their own individual review. And I've actually reviewed about half of them already, so if there's a specific game you want to learn more about, go ahead and check out one of those. There's a whole playlist. Expect more in the future. But for now, we're going to focus solely on the Cowabunga Collection itself, what it gets right, and unfortunately, the major things it gets wrong. That if we're lucky, will be fixed. Which will also date this video. Cowabunga. So for those of you too young to be there in the late 80s and early 90s, we're young at heart. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles basically dominated the world. They were everywhere. Movies, cartoons, toys, comics, those cheap little accessories that we all wanted but never actually used. And of course, video games. Lots of games, spanning multiple genres and consoles. We're talking 2 original 4-player co-op arcade games, one of which basically defined the beat-em-up genre. The original Game Boy trilogy, consisting of 2 platformers and, believe it or not, a Metroidvania-style game before the term Metroidvania even existed. The original NES trilogy, containing the infamous action platformer TMNT 1, as well as the gems TMNT 2 and TMNT 3, both awesome beat-em-ups. There's the 3 variations of the Tournament Fighter games, including the rare NES version, the crappy Genesis version, and the Street Fighter knockoff SNES version, which is actually pretty great. Hyperstone Heist is a great but often overshadowed beat-em-up on the Genesis, and of course the game that overshadowed it, and is often considered the best of the TMNT games, and one of, if not the greatest beat-em-ups ever made, TMNT 4, Turtles in Time. And for the first time ever, the Cowabunga Collection brings them all together in one simple package. I don't know if it's awesome or just kinda depressing that they fit my entire childhood on such a little chip. Now, assuming we're sticking to the classic era Turtles, the only games that are missing from this collection would be the Manhattan missions for DOS, of all things, and of course all those weird little ports that nobody really cares about. As well as, I guess, TMNT Reshelled, if you really want to count that. But considering the spread that we got, nobody's complaining, especially considering the price that some of these games command in their original format. So just looking at this from a financial viewpoint, especially if you want to play these games legally, most of these games alone, and we're just talking the cartridges here, no boxes, no manuals, will still run you about the same amount as the entire collection, if not more. So already, we're off to a pretty great start. And all of these games are about as close to the original versions as possible, both graphically and audibly, though there are some slight tweaks here and there, like the removal of all the Pizza Hut branding in the second NES game, which is, however you feel about that, but at least the music in the arcade port isn't completely butchered like it was in the versions that came with Battle Nexus and Mutant Nightmare. Though, I'd be remiss not to mention that yes, like in other ports of the arcade game, the original theme song has been changed. Obviously due to licensing or something like that. Lame. But this version isn't bad, so I'll let it slide. And it's in comparison to those original formats that the original Cowabunga Collection strikes hard, beyond just accessibility, by improving the playability in just so many ways. As expected of a modern re-release, many of the quality of life improvements that you'd expect are here. Things like a rewind feature, letting you undo the last 10 seconds of your run, screen size control, different screen filters for that more classic look, remapping controls, which is especially great if you're playing on Steam and have some USB controllers to better replicate that authentic feel, and of course, as one would expect, save states. We can finally beat this game! But here's where the Cowabunga Collection really goes one step beyond, and is one of the major draws for me personally. All of the games have been given the option of enable enhancements. Now these vary from game to game, most of which are just automatically enabling the game's cheat codes, like the ability to play as the bosses in the fighting games, or level selects in some of the brawlers. But some are a bit more interesting. The two arcade games offer up a Nightmare mode, which maxes out how many enemies will appear at a time for a much greater challenge. But they also offer up a Turbo mode, which increases speed, and even a God mode that lets you one-hit kill enemies. And of course, you can mix and match these modes for some fun and awesome new ways to play these amazing classics, because, let's be real, arcade brawlers can get a bit stale over time. But what I really want to draw attention to is how they actually fixed some of these older games, which again is optional for you purists. For the classic NES games, they actually took advantage of modern hardware to remove all that pesky slowdown and flickering that really hindered these games. I mean, just check out NES TMNT side by side. Well, now it's just too easy! For you hardcore Turtle fans, retro gamers, and aspiring game devs, there's a treasure trove of bonus materials worth checking out, including high quality scans of every box for each game, spanning the different regions, game manuals, which actually includes the manuals for the arcade machines, that's kinda crazy, strategy guides for each game, though mileage may vary. They even have those wacky old game ads, sound tests for each game, stills from the different cartoons, and even comic covers from across the ages. There is just so much here. But the real wow factor for me is the inclusion of the classic game design documents for all of the games, showing off high quality animation cells, storyboards, concept art, and so much more. I have never seen half of this stuff before, and it is a real treat. Those of you looking to become game devs should absolutely check it out, especially the tournament fighter stuff. It's radical. But despite all of that, who are we kidding? I know that's not what you want to hear, none of my gushing, no babbling about childhoods. You all want to know what's wrong with this collection. You'd make great foot soldiers. Now, while we could easily just sit here and nitpick the menu controls or how the enhancements can't be activated mid-game, there's really only one major problem that really holds this game back: the online play. Easily the biggest feature the game could offer to bring the classic TMNT games into the modern age, help a new generation experience the next best thing to classic couch co-op or huddling around an arcade machine, and they screwed it up hard.
Come back here! I'm not finished with you! Damn!
For starters, not every game is available for online play, and obviously I'm not counting the single player games, because I can't count that high. At the time of this game's launch, the only games available for online play are the two arcade games, the SNES Tournament Fighter and Hyperstone Heist, meaning that 5 whole games got the shaft. And while I doubt anyone's really gonna raise shell about not being able to play the Genesis or NES Tournament Fighters online, especially over the SNES version anyway, how could they not include online play for the most popular TMNT game, TMNT 4? But yet, Hyperstone Heist got online co-op? That game is great, but it's also basically an altered version of TMNT 4, so really doesn't make any sense. And even with the arcade version available, people still love TMNT 2 on the NES, and more people need to play TMNT 3. that game is a gem. But, believe it or not, it gets worse.
You lie!
Ignoring the lack of all of the games having online support, the online itself just does not work well. Lag is a real problem, especially in the arcade games. And while it's technically serviceable with only 2 players, only really having minor audio issues, gameplay starts to lag real hard once a 3rd player joins in. So bad in fact that it's basically unplayable. Shell, I joined an online game as the 3rd player and I couldn't even load in. It's that broken. Plus, if the host quits, the game just ends, which is real lame. And you can't play local co-op and go online to find other players either. Like, really? And this is extra crazy since the 1UP arcade machines actually have online play, though I haven't tried them myself. But what I have tried is TMNT Arcade back when it was on Xbox Live Arcade. And the online for that were great. You know, before it got delisted. Now, I have heard that Tournament Fighters got special treatment with its own rolling netcodes to help prevent all the lag for the best fighting game experience. Unfortunately, I was never able to find anyone playing this game online, and it's not like the game has the best lobby system either, so odds are that hardcore fans of the game will probably just stick to their online emulated play that they've cultivated communities around for years now. Unfortunately, as it stands now, if you're looking to play any of these games online, emulation is still king. And let's be real, while nothing will ever truly top couch co-op, especially with these kinds of classic games, and this game does do couch co-op well, the lack of quality online does not help the cause. And if it doesn't get fixed in the future, we'll probably end up limiting this game to basically just those who have the most nostalgia for them. But hey, let's not end this on such a sour note, and instead take a moment to appreciate and admire the fact that this exists at all. While game collections are released all the time, with a handful of games getting re-release after re-release after re-release, looking at you, Sega, Nintendo. Getting re-releases of games based on licensed titles is exceptionally rare. And while I'm not going to sit here and just tell you not to emulate, though legally I probably should, just keep in mind, the Cowabunga Collection could have easily just been another corporate cash grab. But all the upgrades, the extra bells and whistles, shows that there was some real love that went into this one. If they can fix the online problems with an update, this collection will reach its full potential, easily surpassing what emulation offers. And maybe, just maybe, if it succeeds, we'll see more collections like this one in the future. And not just with the Turtles. The Mighty Morphin Collection, anyone?